Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank the group for coming in and answering our questions and giving your testimony. You all look nice and tight together. Very nice. We were like that earlier today. Specifically, Mr. Reiner, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I'm also from Wisconsin, the 7th District. We like our beer in Wisconsin, and cheap beer, or inexpensive beer, I should say, not cheap. Also, our district is home to Leinenkugels, which is a great employer in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and they make great beer there. And so I have some, I think, questions that are relevant to the impact of the Dodd-Frank rules and the beer industry. If you look at the regulations that are about to come down, is it going to be more expensive for you to enter into derivative contracts to hedge your risk?
Well, we do both vanilla, over-the-counter trades. We do future trades. We do customized trades, as I mentioned in my testimony. So, should there be a change in the margin requirements for end users that would change the complexion of our working capital, it would certainly have an impact across the board. Certainly, commodities have are certainly a component of our final price and how we manage that price. So, but it's not the only factor relative to pricing beer. We believe that really, I have to also speak on behalf of the coalition that these margin requirements that were discussed off and on really could impact capital investment, could impact how your working capital is employed.
And with the cost increases, potentially those would obviously be passed on to consumers?
Well, if the marketplace, it'd be up to the marketplace.
Okay. And if they are passed on, obviously the cost of our six-packs go up. Fair to say?
It would certainly have an impact on the cost of the
okay.
I knew that was coming.
Congressman. Excuse me, Congressman. If I could just interject,
yes, I'm sorry.
There's one other cost you need to consider when you're considering the end user away from margin and the actual processing of a trade. You need to consider the execution cost as well, and sometimes that can go up and go down. So one thing I think would be interesting to look at is when a marketplace becomes more transparent, the execution costs actually go lower. There's estimated to be about $50 billion worth of execution costs currently in interest rate swaps and CDS today on an annual basis. And if you allow central limit order books and transparency into the marketplace where buyers and sellers can meet each other directly, those fees should tend to go down. We estimate that those fees could go down by as much as $30 to $40 billion.
In regard to the issue of transparency, I think everyone here would agree that companies like AIG and some of their contracts, all of their contracts, we should have more transparency. It could have stopped the crisis that I think AIG played a big part in. But is there a concern if, say, Miller Coors is entering into, contracts for aluminum, and we've talked about the liquidity in the marketplace with aluminum contracts. If you're entering into a contract, and it's probably a big contract, does that have an impact on the market if you're forced to disclose the contract that you're entering into? Is there a cost component with the transparency of end users with an over-the-counter contract?
In regards to transparency, Congressman, I think it's really all about the details and the careful implementation of any new rules. We would, as a beer guy and someone that actually uses these tools that we're talking about, the level of confidentiality is certainly critical. You kind of touched on that, and I think the rules would allow for that. But I think the issue of additional costs, the devil's in the details again. We don't want to add additional costs to the regulatory system because that does translate right into our cost of goods sold.
Okay, and just if I could ask the panel one other question. If you look at what we're doing here with our rules, it appears that we're leading the way with reforming our rules and regulation in regard to derivatives, as opposed to the EU and other Asian markets. If this raises the cost of our contracts, is it possible or feasible that we're going to see more of our derivative markets go to places like Singapore and Hong Kong?
We're already
overseas?
hearing from clients, especially European clients who deal with multiple banks, including our London branch, things like, it's not clear to me whether we will be caught up in Dodd-Frank, but if we deal with Barclays or Credit Suisse or a European bank, we won't be subject to this. Why should we take the risk of dealing with you and having to clear our contracts?
So is it fair
The
to say
time of
that-
the gentleman has expired.